The flash was not an explosion. It was a silent white-orange bloom that filled the viewport of the Concorde station, bleaching the colors from the nebula for one terrible, beautiful second. It was the Guangmyang's forward shields overloading, vaporizing, and then its dense hull meeting the focused subspace sheer head-on. There was no sound in the vacuum, but in the gallery, every being felt the tremor, the wrong, sickening vibration in space simply ceased. The violent, strobing lights on the station steadied into a dim, constant glow. The gravity plates stopped their sickening lurch and returned to a perfect, gentle hold. The air processors hummed back to life, slowly scrubbing the acrid smell of fear and burning filters. The silence that followed was different. It was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of a breath held too long, finally released into a void of understanding. On the main viewer, the beautiful, deadly colors of the serene expanse swirled, but calmly now. The intense, focused knot of energy was gone, scattered into harmless ripples. Between the nebula and the station, where the human ship had been, there was only a dissipating cloud of metallic vapor, glittering like frozen tears in the distant starlight. A few larger, dark chunks of debris tumbled slowly, silently. No one spoke. The Zerillian Elrin slowly unfurled his fronds, his sensory cluster taking in the peaceful, stable light. The Kith ambassador's clicking ceased, its body still trembling, but now from the aftermath of agony, not the agony itself. The Elok gathered itself slowly, pulling its form back into a cohesive whole, a process of profound relief. In the communications pit, Sumi was crying. She didn't try to hide it. The tears were quiet, rolling down her cheeks as she stared at the empty space on her monitor where the bridge feed had been. She had watched the course plot. She had seen the engine fire. She had understood the final message. They had shaken in silence, and the Deathworlders had taken one step forward, one step into oblivion. A weak, static-filled signal hissed over the station's general comms. It was automated, repeating on a loop. Sumi's console identified it instantly. A Class 1 universal distress beacon, linked to a ship's hardened data core. She wiped her face with her sleeve, and her fingers flew, cleaning up the signal, boosting the audio. A voice filled the gallery, rough with static and something else, the strain of immense G-forces. It was Captain Day, Concorde Station. This is Captain Day of the Guangmyang. Wave dispersion is complete. Your immediate space is secure. A cough, wet and raw, sounded in the silence. We are requesting emergency medical assistance. The message repeated once more, then died into static. The words hung in the air. Requesting emergency medical assistance. From a ship that was clearly gone. From a crew that had just chosen to die. It was not a plea. It was a statement of fact, a final stubborn adherence to protocol, and a quiet, devastating hope. Overseer Elrin found his voice first. It was a soft, broken chime. Medical and rescue teams, he said. Then louder, the chime firming with a command none had ever heard from him before. All teams. All available craft. Dispatch immediately. Scan for life pods. Scan for survivor signatures. Go! The station, so graceful and slow to action, erupted into a frenzy of a different kind. It was not the frenzy of panic, but of purpose. Shuttles, sleek and medical white, shot from their bays, their gentle drives pushed to speeds they were never designed for, heading toward the glittering debris field. Sumi was on the first shuttle. She couldn't not be. They scanned, their delicate sensors probing the chaotic soup of radiation and metal. For a long time, they found nothing but wreckage. A piece of hull with Korean lettering. A torn jumpsuit. Sumi's heart felt like a stone. Then, a signal. Faint behind a larger, spinning chunk of the engine housing. a hardened emergency pod designed to withstand atmospheric re-entry and deep-sea pressure. A Deathworlders lifeboat. They latched onto it with gentle tractor beams and brought it into the shuttle bay. The pod was scorched black. One side melted away, but its core was intact. With careful, almost reverent hands, they cracked the seal. Inside, curled in the cramped space, was Mena. Her face was pale, smudged with soot and blood from a cut on her forehead. She was unconscious, but her chest rose and fell in a steady, strong rhythm. Next to her, strapped in with webbing, was Jay. He was awake, one arm clearly broken, held against his chest. His eyes were squinted in pain, but they were clear. He looked past the concerned, delicate faces of the Zerillian medics, his gaze finding Su-Mi. Did it work? He asked, his voice a dry rasp. The station? Su-Mi nodded. Unable to speak, Jay closed his eyes, letting out a long, shaky breath. Good. Tell them. The forward compartments were evacuated. He stayed at the con. To make sure the course held. He opened his eyes again, and the pain in them was not just physical. He stayed. They found no other pods. Days later, Mina sat in a quiet, soft-lit recovery room, her arm in a cast. Elrond himself came to see her. His fronds dipped low in a gesture of profound respect and apology. We did not understand, he chimed softly. We saw only strength and thought of violence. We did not see that the strongest walls are not built to imprison, but to shelter. Mina looked out the viewport at the stars. On our world, the most dangerous predators are not the ones that roar the loudest. They are the quiet ones that stalk. You were waiting for us to roar. We were just trying to point at the cliff. She looked at him. Captain Day. He was a quiet man. He liked to grow flowers in his cabin, roses. He said it was a fight to make something beautiful on a world that loved to break things. The story spread through the Concord, not as a tale of terrifying power, but of terrifying sacrifice. They had feared the humans for their hard skin, their dense bones, their ships that shrugged off radiation. Now they understood. Those things were not for making war. They were for enduring it. They were for standing in the path of the galaxy's fury so others would not have to. When Mina and Jay were well enough, a ceremony was held in the Great Gallery. The viewport showed the serene stars, a now peaceful nebula. A memorial plaque, grown from living crystal, was placed on the wall. It bore the image of the Guangyang and the names of its crew, including Captain Day, inscribed below. In the flowing script of the Concord and the blocky letters of Korean was a single line. They stepped forward. The fear was gone, replaced by a humbling, solemn gratitude. The Deathworlders had not brought death. They had looked at it, measured its approach, and then walked out to meet it so that others might live. They had redefined strength for the entire galactic Concord dot as the ceremony ended. Su-Mi stood with Mina and Jay, looking out at the stars where the ship had died. The silence was comfortable now. It was the silence of memory and of a promise. What now? Su-Mi asked. Jay, his arm in a sling, managed a small, hard smile. Now, they'll listen when we point at the cliff. And maybe we can teach them how to build a wall or two. He looked at the fragile, beautiful beings around them, no longer seeing weakness, but something precious to be protected. And maybe they can teach us how to grow better roses. They stood together, the survivors, looking at a future that was no longer shaped by silence and fear, but by a single forward step taken in the dark. The groan of the Guangmyang's hull was a constant sound now, like a great beast in pain. Sparks still fizzled from a broken console. The lights flickered, powered by emergency batteries. On the main screen, the image of the Concord station was breaking apart into digital blocks and then reforming, each time showing a new, silent disaster a flickering spire, a drifting piece of hull plating, the frantic, useless flare of tiny thrusters on a crippled shuttle dock. Captain Day stood in the center of it all, his boots magnetically locked to the deck. He looked at the faces of his crew. Mina's eyes were red, not from tears, but from staring at her screens, watching the biological models for the Concord species spike into the red zone of terminal trauma. Jay's knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of his engineering station, his body tense like a coiled spring. "Give me the tactical summary," Day said. His voice was a rock in the storm. Jay didn't turn around. "The wave's energy is concentrating. The station's shield harmonics are acting like a tuning fork, pulling the worst of the subspace shear right to their central ring. In approximately 6 minutes, the peak will hit. Their gravity plating will overload and rupture. The structural lattice will experience resonant fragmentation." He paused, his voice dropping. "It'll be like shaking a glass castle. Then the uncontrolled energy will wash over the rest of the fleet. They'll all become clouds of glitter." Mina added, her voice hollow, "For the life forms, it will be instantaneous. The Xerillians' nervous systems will short out. The Kith will experience synaptic cascade. Their minds will burn out from the input. The Yalok will simply cease to be coherent. They'll dissipate. Options for them?" Day asked, already knowing the answer. "None," Mina said, the word final. "They cannot power down their shields in time. The instability is feeding on them now. They cannot outrun the wavefront. Their ships are not built for violent maneuvers. Evacuation is impossible. They are trapped." The bridge was silent again, save for the deep, protesting groan of the ship and the beep of the countdown timer, 5:47. Day's eyes moved back to the fractured image of the station. He saw beauty there, even in its death throes. A civilization that chose art over armor, peace over power. They had feared his people for their strength, and now they would be erased for their fragility. The unfairness of it was a physical weight in his chest. "Options for us," he said, his voice even quieter. This time, Jay turned. He knew what the captain was asking. He had been running the numbers since the wave began. "If we stay here, at the edge of the effect, we'll take a beating. Serious hull damage, possible loss of primary power. But we'll survive. The wave focused on them will largely pass us by." He took a breath. "Or we can move. We can use our main engine at full power. We can plot a course directly into the path of a focused energy between the nebula's epicenter and the station." "To do what?" Mina asked, though her face showed she understood. "To be a wall," Jay said flatly. "Our hull is dense. Our structural integrity fields are brute force. Our gravity dampeners are simple, robust. We can't stop the wave, but we can disrupt it. We can put our mass and our magnetic shadow in the way. We can take the focused beam and scatter it, turn a killing lance into a handful of thrown rocks." "The effect on the ship?" Day asked. Jay met his gaze. "Catastrophic. The focused energy will overwhelm our forward shields in seconds. The hull will ablate vaporize. The stress will likely break the ship's spine. The radiation and dimensional shear will flood the forward sections. Even with all safeguards?" He shook his head. "The probability of the Guangmyong remaining intact is 0. The probability of any of us in the forward compartment surviving is negligible." The word hung in the air. Negligible. They all looked at the station again. They saw the terrified, fragile beings they had never met, who had called them monsters, who had trembled at their very image. Mina spoke first, her voice soft but clear. "They are not our enemies. They are just different. And they are about to die for being different." Jay ran a hand through his hair. "We came out here to meet new life, to find a place. not to watch an entire choir of voices get snuffed out because they were afraid of our rough hands. Captain Day closed his eyes for a moment. He saw not the station, but Earth, a world of tempests and earthquakes, of predators and poison, a world that forged its children in fire and pressure, making them hard, making them resilient, making them capable of this, not of destruction, but of sacrifice. The ultimate, terrible use of a Deathworlder's strength, to stand between death and the soft things of the universe. He opened his eyes. There was no anger in them, no heroism, only a deep, weary resolve. Jay, plot the course. Maximum burn. Aim for the heart of the instability. Use everything we have: forward shields, structural fields, the mass of the ship itself as a battering ram against that wave. Jay nodded once, a sharp military gesture, and spun back to his console. His hands flew, no longer frantic, but precise and deadly calm. Mina, they continued. Initiate general distress beacon. Lock it to the ship's black box. Then get to the reinforced aft emergency shelter. Take anyone you can with you. Captain, she began to protest. That's an order, Doctor, he said, his voice leaving no room. Someone needs to tell them what happened here. After. Mina's jaw tightened, but she obeyed, her fingers flying over her console before she unstrapped and moved quickly toward the rear hatch. Day took his seat in the command chair. He strapped in. He watched the countdown. 3:15. On the station, in the chaos and the flickering light, Sumi saw it first. On her feed, Jay's engineering screen was visible for a second. She saw the new course plot flash into existence. A single glaring red line. It did not curve away. It did not retreat. It was a sharp, straight, aggressive vector. It pointed like a dagger from the Guangmyong directly into the swirling, angry heart of the serene expanse, placing the human ship squarely between the coming storm and the station. Her breath caught in her throat. She understood. It was not an attack run. It was an interception. Look, she whispered, but her voice was lost in the din. On the bridge, Captain Day opened a final channel. Not to the station, but to his crew, shipwide. His face filled the small screen in the emergency shelter, where Mina and a few others huddled, and it filled Sumi's private monitor. This is the captain. We have taken all the time we have. Now we take a step. It has been an honor. He reached forward and cut the channel. Course laid in, Jay reported, his hand over the main thruster control. Do it, Captain Day said. On the main viewer of the Concorde station, the Deathworlder ship, which had sat so still and dark and terrifying for so long, suddenly blazed with light. Its main engine, a crude fusion torch compared to their graceful gravity drives, ignited in a furious, blue-white pillar of fire that could be seen with the naked eye, with a slowness that was somehow more terrifying than speed. The ugly, scarred, durable ship began to move. It turned its battered nose away from the station. It did not flee. It gathered itself. And then, with a final silent command, it took one step forward. The engine flare brightened into a miniature sun. The Guangmyong accelerated with a brutal physical force that no Concorde ship could ever survive. It did not fire weapons. It did not transmit threats. It simply deliberately, and with every ounce of its formidable power, threw itself on the sword about to strike the Concorde down dot in the gallery. Overseer Elrin watched, his pain forgotten. The Kith ambassador, in its silent agony, grew still. The meaning of the action was unmistakable, even across the chasm of their differences. It was not attack, it was sacrifice. The monster was charging to its death, not toward them, but toward the darkness behind them. And in that moment, the wall of fear in their minds, brick by terrified brick, finally crumbled into dust, leaving only a staggering, incomprehensible awe. The Guangmyong, a bright light indeed, shot toward the storm, growing smaller against the vast, angry nebula. The countdown on Jay's screen, unseen by them all, reached 0. It did not arrive with a roar or a flash of light. It was a silent, terrible tremor in the fabric of space itself. On the Concorde station, the first sign was not a sound, but a feeling. A deep, wrong vibration that went straight to the bone, or the exoskeleton, or the central gel matrix. The gentle, omnipresent light in the gallery flickered, then began to pulse in a rapid, throbbing rhythm. For the Xerillians, whose eyes processed light in slow, beautiful waves, this was pure agony. Elrin, the diplomat, let out a chime that was a shriek of pain, folding his pearlescent fronds over his sensory cluster. He stumbled, his graceful form now awkward and pained. Gravity, the one constant the station mastered perfectly, became a traitor. The plates underfoot surged and dipped. It wasn't enough to throw anyone into the air, but it was a constant, dizzying lurch. For the Eloque philosopher, it was a disaster. Its carefully maintained form sloshed and wobbled on its platform. The unstable gravity field interfered with its bioelectric cohesion. Parts of its blue gel body stretched thin like taffy before snapping back, a process that translated as searing, disorienting pain. It emitted a low-frequency moan of distress. It vibrated in the teeth of every humanoid present. The Kith ambassador froze, its obsidian body locking in place. The chaotic gravity waves were not just physical to it. They were a scream. Its entire world was built on precise vibrations, the click of communication, the subtle hum of the ship, the resonant frequency of its own shell. Now, 1,000 different discordant, crushing frequencies hammered into it. It was deafened, blinded, and scalded from the inside out. Its mandibles clicked in a frantic, broken rhythm, a desperate and failing attempt to anchor itself in the noise. Alarms sounded, but they were mismatched and jarring, adding to the sensory hell. On the main viewer, the image of the asteroid field and the human ship fractured into static and then came back, twisted and rolling. The communications pit. Sumi held onto her console, her knuckles white. The lurching floor made her stomach turn. The strobe lights sent pounding needles into her temples. But she was functional. She was scared, but her body understood this as a rough sea, a bad quake. Her eyes stayed glued to her monitor, to the feed from the Guangmyong. The difference was breathtaking. On the human bridge, the wave hit and the ship groaned. It was a deep, metallic sound, the protest of a mighty machine under stress. The view on the feed shook violently, but the image held. Captain Day grabbed the back of his command chair, his legs bracing wide. Mina tightened her harness, her head snapping to the side, but her hands flying back to her console. Jay was thrown against his station, grunting with the impact, but immediately he was shouting. Hull stress at 12%. Dampeners holding. It's a messy one, but we're in the pipe. The ship shuddered and bucked like a truck on a broken road. Loose panels rattled. A conduit overhead spat sparks, and an automatic extinguisher hissed. It was violent, loud, and chaotic. But it was normal. To them, this was not the end of the world. It was a problem. An engineering challenge. A bad patch of weather. They were being tossed, but they were not coming apart. Sumi watched them work. They, barking orders to check on the crew in the lower decks. Mina, calling out life sign readings. Jay, rerouting power from non-essential systems with brutal efficiency. Their faces were set in concentration, not terror. They were in motion. She looked up from her screen at the gallery. It was a scene from a different, softer reality breaking apart. The Xerillians were huddled together, chiming in distress. The Kith was curled inward, a statue of suffering. The Eloque was slowly losing its shape, dripping over the edges of its platform in helpless, pained globs. Station crew, slender and delicate, stumbled as they tried to respond to systems that were failing in ways their technology never anticipated. The very air, once sweet, now tasted of ozone and something acrid burning delicate filters. The disparity was a slap in the face. The Concorde, in their perfect, safe bubble, were being undone by a natural phenomenon. The humans from the brutal Deathworld were weathering it. Their scarred, ugly ship took the beating with a groan and held together. Their robust, dense bodies handled the lurching gravity and the harsh lights. Their minds processed the chaos as a situation to be managed, not an existential horror. On the Guangmyong's bridge, Mina was shouting over the groan of metal. The wave's main peak is still building. It's focusing. The station's shields are making it worse, like a lens. They're pulling the worst of it right toward them. Jay nodded, his screen a riot of angry physics. Confirmed. The frequency is tuning to their shield harmonic. When the big one hits, it won't just shake them. It'll snap their structural spines and turn their insides to slurry. Captain Day stared at the main viewer. Past the static, he could see the graceful station. Its beautiful spires were now outlined by erratic, failing energy flickers. He saw a small Concorde shuttle, caught in the lurching gravity, spin slowly and crash against a docking arm in a silent blossom of debris. His face, always hard, seemed to turn to stone. "They can't outrun it," he said, his voice flat. "They can't hide from it. And they won't believe it's coming until it's on top of them." In the gallery, Overseer Elrin finally managed to get a stable communication line to his engineering deck. "What is happening?" He chimed, the sound frayed with pain. "The instability." "It is real," came the shocked, translated reply. "The human data." It was correct. "Our shields are accelerating the effect. We are causing our own destruction." The words washed over the gallery, a cold, final tide. The fear of the humans evaporated, replaced by a much older, more primitive fear. The fear of the void, of helplessness, of a universe that was not serene at all. They had been so busy watching the lion in the cage, they hadn't heard the floodwaters rising. Su-me saw the realization dawn on Ellerin's expressive fronds. The shame, the horror, the utter despair. He looked from his suffering people to the main viewer, where the human ship still hung, enduring the storm they had refused to believe in. Silence did not return. It was filled now with the sounds of a fragile paradise, breaking the moans of pain, the crackle of failing systems, the desperate, clicking cries of the kith. They were shaking, not just from the physical tremors, but from the seismic shift in their understanding. The monsters had been right. And now the monsters were watching them die. Captain Day's voice cut through the noise on his own bridge, quiet and definitive. Options. Jay and Mina looked at him. They knew what he was asking. There were no options for the Concorde. Their only option was a terrible one, and it belonged to the Guangmyong. The countdown to the wave's catastrophic peak glowed on Jay's screen. 8 minutes. On the station, they huddled and suffered. On the human ship, 3 people looked at a screen, looked at each other, and began to calculate the price of a decision no one should ever have to make. The quiet on the bridge now was the quiet before a step. The silence on the bridge of the Guangmyong was not peaceful. It was the quiet of a hospital waiting room, thick with unspoken thoughts and the low hum of stressed systems. The main viewer still showed the stunning, delicate architecture of the Concorde station, a flower of light against the dark. On a smaller screen to the side, data from the station's public channels streamed biological readings, atmospheric stats, and most tellingly, the aggregate stress levels of the beings aboard. A graph spiked and danced with jagged red lines. Mina did not look at the beautiful station. Her eyes were fixed on the biological data. She watched the heart rate equivalents of the Xerillians elevate into what, for them, would be a medical emergency. She saw the neurochemical spikes in the Ilok, indicating profound anxiety. "It's like they're watching a horror film on a loop," she said, her voice clinical but edged with pity. "Every time our ship adjusts its orientation by a fraction of a degree, their collective panic rises. Captain, they are not just cautious. They are biologically incapable of not being terrified of us. Our mere presence is a toxin to their peace." At his engineering station, Jay let out a short, frustrated breath. His hands were a blur across 3 different panels. "They're scared of the wrong thing," he muttered, louder this time. "They're staring at a lion while a tsunami is gathering behind them." He sent a data packet to the main screen. It was a spectral analysis of the local space, focused on the beautiful, pastel-colored nebula, the Concorde, called the Serene Expanse. To the Concorde, it was a scenic backdrop, a harmless cloud of ionized gas and dust. On Jay's scan, it was a swirling vortex of angry colors. "Subspace instability," he announced. "It's building fast. See these gravity wave harmonics? They're completely out of sync. It's like a sound wave that can shatter glass. To us, it'll be a rough ride, broken bones if you're not strapped in, maybe some hull stress. To them," he pulled up the structural analysis of a typical Concorde vessel. Its hull was a thin, elegant lattice, designed for lightness and beauty, held together by focused gravity fields. That wave will pass through their gravity, plating like a knife through water. It'll resonate. It'll shake their ships apart at the molecular level. And the life forms inside?" He trailed off, glancing at Minna. Mina's face paled. She called up the Kith's physiological chart. The Kith communicate and navigate via subtle vibrations in their exoskeletons. A chaotic gravity pulse would feel like the universe screaming directly into their minds. It would be utter sensory hell, probably fatal. She switched to the Alok. Their cohesion is maintained by a precise bioelectric field. A dimensional shear would scramble them, literally. Captain Day absorbed this, his weathered face grim. "Can we warn them?" "I've been trying," Jay said. "I'm sending the raw data on every frequency, in every format I can think of. But their systems are filtering it. They see the data stream from the Deathworlder ship, and their protocols are probably classifying it as a potential weapon signature or jamming attempt. They're not listening. They're just watching us, waiting for us to roar." Day straightened. "Then we make them listen." Sumi opened a direct channel to the station's command. "Visual, keep it calm." Down in the Concorde gallery, Sumi jumped as her console chimed with an incoming visual request from the Guangmyong. Her Elok supervisor, Glear, pulsed with alarm, his blue form contracting. "What is this? An ultimatum?" "A communication request, Supervisor," Sumi said, her fingers trembling as she prepared the link. "Put it on the main viewer." The station's overseer, a tall Xerillian named Elrin, chimed nervously. "But isolate the feed. Be ready to sever it." The beautiful starfield on the main screen vanished, replaced by the bridge of the Guangmyo. There was a collective flinch in the gallery. The humans looked so solid. Their environment was harsh light and gray metal, not soft glow and gentle curves. Captain Day stood in the center, his hands visible and empty. "Galactic Concorde Station." Day's voice was slow, careful, each word a stone placed deliberately on a path. "This is Captain Day of the Earth vessel, Guangmyong. We have detected a critical subspace instability building in the nebula you designate Serene Expanse. The wave will reach your position in approximately 47 minutes. It poses a catastrophic threat to your vessels and biologicals. You must disperse. Move to higher orbit." Power down your gravity-dependent systems. Please acknowledge and act. In the gallery, the fear turned to confusion, then to suspicion. The Kith ambassador clicked rapidly to Elrin. The translation whispered through the air. A trick. They wish us to lower our shields, to panic and break formation. It is a predator's tactic to scatter the herd. Elrin's fronds shook. Your data is unverified, Captain. The serene expanse is harmless. We have monitored it for centuries. On the screen, Jay could be seen leaning forward, his calm breaking. It's not harmless. Scan the tertiary gravity bands. Look at the quantum flux. You have to see it. His urgent movement, his raised voice, was the worst thing he could have done. To the Concorde, it was the sudden lunge of the predator. Alarm sirens, silent but visible as flashing amber lights, lit up the station. The Concorde's shield projectors, designed to deflect debris and radiation, hummed a higher power level. You are causing destabilization with your transmissions. Elrin accused, his chime-like voice sharp with fear. Cease your emissions and return to your holding pattern. On the Guangmyong, Jay stared at his instruments in horror. Captain, their shield frequency. It's interacting with the instability. They're amplifying it. They're pulling the wave in faster, like a magnet. Day's shoulders slumped for a fraction of a second, the weight of utter helplessness pressing down. He saw the same realization dawning on Mina's face. They had found the cliff's edge, had shouted a warning, and the people they were trying to save were only plugging their ears and walking faster toward it. They don't believe us, Mina said softly. They can't. Their fear of us is a wall thicker than any hull. Day closed the channel. The screen in the Concorde gallery returned to the view of the silent, scarred ship. The representatives breathed a shaky sigh of relief. The predator had been rebuked. It had sat back down. Datsu Dashmi watched the bridge feed on her private screen. She saw the defeat on Captain Day's face. She saw Jay slamming a fist softly against his console. She saw Mina pulling up the catastrophic biological models again, her lips pressed into a thin line. They were not angry at being called monsters. They were heartsick at being unable to stop a disaster. Her eyes darted to the Concorde's own long-range scans, the public ones she had access to. They showed the serene expanse as a placid, beautiful cloud. But she looked closer, thinking like Jay might think. She looked at the power draw from the station's newly energized shields. She cross-referenced it with subtle fluctuations in the local magnetic field. A tiny, persistent anomaly was forming, right where the human's data had pointed. A cold dread, different from the gallery's fear, seeped into her. It was the dread of seeing the avalanche start, while everyone else admired the snowfall. The station, proud and fragile, thrummed with increased shield energy, feeling safer behind its glowing barriers. The Guangmyong, silent and dark once more, was a hive of frantic, quiet activity. Jay was rerouting power, reinforcing structural integrity fields. Mina was preparing the medical bay for a different kind of emergency. Captain Day stood staring at the now hostile station, at the beautiful, deadly nebula beyond, and the countdown on Jay's panel. 39 minutes. The two groups, separated by a short void of space and an infinite void of understanding, waited. One trembled in silence, eyes locked on the monster they had created in their minds. The other worked in silence, eyes locked on the very real monster approaching from the stellar deep, a monster only they could see coming. The great station of the galactic Concorde hung in the silent black, a jewel of impossible architecture. Its spires were grown, not built, from crystalline alloys that shimmered with soft internal light. The air in the central observation gallery was kept at a perfect, gentle warmth and smelled faintly of ozone and something sweet like flowering algae. It was a place of quiet contemplation, designed for beings who valued peace above all else. Today, the piece was thin and brittle. Before the massive, curved viewport, a collection of beings stood, sat or floated. A Zerillian diplomat, her form like a willow tree, sheathed in mother of pearl, trembled slightly, her fronds making a sound like wind chimes. Next to her, a Kith ambassador, looking like a praying mantis carved from obsidian, stood perfectly still, but the rapid, silent clicking of its mandibles betrayed its distress. A pool of translucent blue gel, an Eloque philosopher, quivered on a special platform, its surface rippling with anxious thoughts. Their many eyes, compound and simple and gelatinous, were fixed not on the stars, but on a single screen that dominated the gallery. On it, against the gritty backdrop of a mineral-rich asteroid field, floated a ship dot. It was the human vessel, the Guangmyong. The word, the Concord linguists assured, meant bright light in the human tongue. The ship itself was anything but. It was a blocky, angular thing, a collection of hard metal boxes and protruding spines. Its hull was not smooth and grown, but welded and bolted. It was scarred. Long gray streaks marked where radiation storms had sandblasted the metal. A spiderweb of pockmarks covered one section, the result of a microscopic crystalline dust that would slice a Concorde shuttle into confetti. It looked less like a starship and more like a tool that had been used for heavy, violent work and then discarded. The silence in the gallery was heavy. It was the silence of deep biological fear. Down in the communications pit, a young human woman named Sue Mi adjusted her headset. She felt terribly small and very exposed. She was the only human on the station, a junior linguist attached to a xeno-studies team that had been recalled the moment the Guangmyong was detected. Her dark hair was tied back neatly, her Concorde issue jumpsuit a soft gray. Her heart hammered against her ribs. On her own monitor, she had a direct feed from the human ship's bridge. She saw Captain Day. He was a man in his 50s, with a face that seemed carved from old leather, lined not with age, but with constant squinting into hard sunlight or harsh instrument readouts. He stood perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the main viewer, which undoubtedly showed the beautiful, terrifying station. Next to him, a woman named Mina studied a flowing stream of data. Mina's face was sharp, intelligent, her eyes missing nothing. Her fingers danced over a console, pulling up biological profiles of the Concorde species. An engineer named Jay was a constant blur of motion on the edge of the feed, tapping screens, muttering to himself, his hands always moving, always fixing, always testing. Su-Me listened to the official Concorde directive playout. The voice from the station's overseer was translated into smooth, careful English. Unidentified vessel Guangmyong, you have entered galactic Concorde protected space. Your point of origin is cataloged as a hyperlethal Category 10 world. Standard quarantine protocol is now in effect. You will remain at your designated coordinates. Do not adjust your position. Do not attempt to approach the station or any Concorde vessel. A containment field has been activated around your sector. Await further instruction. The words were polite, sterile. The meaning was clear. You are a disease. You are a monster. Stay away. On the bridge feed, Sumi saw Captain Day's jaw tighten. A muscle flickered in his cheek. It wasn't anger. She had seen anger. This was something else. It was a profound, weary understanding. It was the look of someone who had been given bad news they already expected. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Mina looked up from her screen. Her voice soft on the internal feed, Sumai could hear. Their physiological readings are spiking, Captain. Just from looking at us. Their baseline stress hormones. To them, this is like standing in a room with a loaded predator. Jay snorted, not looking up from his engineering schematics. Predator? They have atmosphere filters rated for pollen and mild pollutants. One breath of our ship's safe auxiliary engine fumes would put that Cerulean in a coma for a week. Their fear is in the wrong place. But it is real, Mina countered. And it makes them stupid. They see our scars and think violence, not survival. Captain Day finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. We knew this was possible. We follow the protocol. We stay quiet. We stay still. We give them no reason to be more afraid. He turned to his communication station. Acknowledge the directive. Simple, clean. A text-only response scrolled across the main station screen in Sumi's console. Guangmyong acknowledges. Holding position. A ripple went through the gallery. The Cerulean's chime-like trembling increased in pitch. The Kith ambassador's clicking became a frantic, silent drum roll. The simple, obedient response seemed to frighten them more than a shout would have. They had expected protest, rage, the bluster of a wild thing caught in a trap. This calm compliance was outside their understanding. Datsumi felt a hot knot of shame and anger in her stomach. She knew these people. Not Captain Day or Mina or Jay specifically, but their type. She had grown up with them. They were the people who built walls against typhoons, who engineered seeds to grow in toxic soil, who looked at a cliff face and saw a foundation, not a barrier. They were not demons. They were engineers and farmers and stubborn, durable children of a world that never stopped trying to kill them. Her superior, a pale, eloped supervisor named Clear, oozed over to her station. His voice, synthesized through a speaker, was a gentle whisper. Monitor all their frequencies, Sumi. Any deviation, any energy spike, you report it. You understand the danger your species represents. Yes, Supervisor, Sumi whispered back, her eyes glued to the bridge feed. She saw Jay now pointing at a scan of the local sector, his finger stabbing at a swirling, nebulous cloud the Concord charts labeled the Serene Expanse. He was talking fast, his expression serious. Captain Day and Mina leaned in. On the main gallery screen, the Guangmyong hung silent and dark, a black lump against the swirling asteroids. It did nothing. It threatened nothing. It simply existed, and in the perfumed, quiet, safe gallery of the galactic Concord, the representatives of a dozen advanced, peaceful species watched that ugly, scarred lump of metal, and they shook. They shook in a silence filled with nightmares of claws and fire and crushing gravity. They saw a Deathworlder, and their only thought was of death. They did not see the engineers running quiet diagnostics. They did not hear Mina's worried analysis of the nebula's unusual energy signatures. They did not sense Captain Day's heavy patience. They saw a monster in a cage, and the trembling of their fragile bodies was the only sound in the room. The quarantine was not just a field of energy around the ship. It was a wall of fear in their own minds, and they had built it themselves, brick by terrified brick. The humans, for their part, obeyed. They sat in their tough, scarred ship. They watched back, and they waited for the real storm, which they alone could see brewing in the deceptively beautiful colors of the Serene Expanse.